What do you mean there was another Nextfest? When was it? October? This is it, is it? Alright then. I actually quite like the framing device here. There's a lot of games about running a tavern or a farm and making beer, but this is the first game I've played, and I think the first I've ever heard of, where you run a beer brewing monastery. I found the UI and some of the tutorialization slightly unclear. There's no shortcut keys present on the UI and no control menu, so I had to click around a lot. The brewing UI is almost overwhelming with how much information is delivered to the player, with half the screen essentially being redundant information. I didn't even notice the test tubes until half an hour in. I also don't know exactly what the different numbers and little sigils on the choose who brews this ale screen actually means. I had to just assume the person at the top of the little list was the best for the job. Cleaning rooms being an active thing feels strange. I think it should be passive, and maybe this issue is compounded by not having a hotkey. Perhaps maintenance is passive but loses efficiency with maintenance locker distance? Okay, look, I know I've been complaining a lot, but despite my issues, I feel like a full game with more to do, more to make, and more to worry about would enrich the overall experience, because the base is really good. The actual process of making ale being something with variability feels really interesting to explore. I think it's kind of straightforward to get a good green score in ale. At least I think it's a good score. Some curveballs in this area would be good to see, like, I don't know, the spices or something else. And I assume that as the beer itself gets more complicated to make, getting a perfect brew becomes harder and harder, or you end up with multiple brews of the same type of beer with different flavor profiles to better cater to your customer base. That's not something I really saw in the demo, but I feel like it would add a lot. Oh, I thought the bandits were a really interesting thing to throw into the mix, especially since you can appease them and they'll help you out. A more robust faction system with interplay between said factions could be really interesting to see as well. We'll be keeping an eye on this one. Stated release date is 2024. First-person shooter Vampire Survivors. Honestly surprised it took someone this long. Shooting feels alright, but getting headshots feels like an inexact science, and I don't know why. Sometimes it works, sometimes it just doesn't. The aesthetic of the game is on point, and the design of the demo level is also really good. Feels like a combat area in like Painkiller or Dusk or Shadow Warrior. There's a fresh supply of enemies to fight your way through. Zombies, cultists, skeletons, whatever those things are. The Vampire Survivor-ziness is quite a nice addition to the Boomer Shooter formula. Enemies drop glowing blue bits that you pick up to gain experience, just like in VS, and, just like VS, when you level up, you gain access to a new random selection of improvements to pick from, and sometimes a different weapon. I kinda hate the level up screen though. I'll show you a montage so you get what I mean.
Brilliant! Let's have some fun. Brilliant! Let's have some fun. It gets old. Let's have some fun.
It looks like I'm being attacked. It startles me every time. And I would strongly recommend turning that pickup flash all the way down. The core gameplay loop is... I mean, it's exactly what I want from an FPS Survivors-like. Movement feels great, being at low health is tense in a really fun way. Dividing your focus between killing and collecting feels quite natural, it's just a good time. I will say, the melee weapons feel incredibly secondary. You have infinite ammo, so I don't know why they're there. And it's not like they're a mighty boot attack a la Duke Nukem, they're a weapon you have to switch to. It's not a design decision. Also, don't make the same mistake I did playing Flynn. Please play Kate. Jared. His name is Jared. Jared starts with a double-barreled shotgun and can do a goddamn combat slide, but it's not a combat slide. It's tribe-style skiing? Look at this! He's the infinitely better chosen for a game like this. They say it's coming out Q4 this year, and I'm looking forward to it. Where do I even start? Okay, it's like FTL faster than light, but imagine if it was a pure vibes road trip, a pilgrimage to a halcyon summer day. Resource management feels excellent. Energy, cash, durability, and fuel seemed daunting to me at first, then easy during the mid-game, and then incredibly stressful by the end. Exactly how it should. As you drive, you encounter road events that you have to solve. Your skills take the form of patterns that you place over the icons on your dashboard, and any matching icons are removed from the line. Remove them all to win. If you line up everything, i.e. use the skill perfectly, you get an extra move. It sounds complicated, but I hope from the footage that it's actually really simple, and that simplicity lends itself to some really interesting problem solving. Hitchhikers are basically party members that you find on your journey. They provide unique skills and come with quests as well, such as the Hurricane giving me a quest to drink and drive. It leans into one of her skills, which can only be active when you're drunk or high, but removes any 3 icons on the dashboard, which is damn powerful, but risky, obviously. And that's just one example. The other hitchhikers I found had their own quests, and their skills are just as interesting, even providing you skill mechanics. Managing status effects is another dimension of resource management. They seem to happen randomly, so it's worth keeping around items that solve them. I really love how some food items like chips don't cure hungry, but they do cure starving, or how coffee can cure both tired and restore energy, but you can't let it get cold. There's a lot you can do with your car as well, installing things like AC systems, and a roll cage, different wheels, even different paint jobs. These provide benefits during road events, prevent status effects, and so on. So that's the mechanics, nuts and bolts stuff. What Keep Driving absolutely nails on top of all of that is the vibe. The music, incredible. It's just so appropriate. It backdrops everything absolutely beautifully. The graphics, sublime. Somehow they managed to make the UI very obviously car, but it's also incredibly readable. And you select your hitchhikers during road events by choosing them in the rearview mirror. It's so clever, and that's what I'm talking about. The story, well, that depends on you. I decided to keep mostly to the middle right-hand side of the map, away from the highway. I mostly avoided jobs, but one I did take memorably involved me driving a band's gear across the next town over, mostly because of the logistics. I really thought I wasn't going to be able to carry everything I had with me. Hot tip, you can move stuff out of the car to make room to rotate stuff. I spent a lot of the trip keeping myself awake with various beverages, and that worked, but at the very last stop before my friend's house, I ran dry and had to sleep in my car. So now, I was cold. Add to that, my Hurricane Hitchhiker has a trait which constantly keeps me tired, and the looming threat of my hunger status effect, and it was looking pretty dicey. We jumped in the car and made that perilous final leg of the journey. We got lost. Then we found an abandoned hut. A smart crowbar is always handy. But then we got lost again, and I had no more tools at my disposal. Everything I could use to get me further on the right track was too expensive, and my glove box was almost empty and held nothing of use anyway. So, I gunned it. This was the last thing on the road, it had to be. I couldn't survive getting lost again, or potholes, or whatever other horrors this back road had in store for me. I didn't even notice my CD had run out of music. Cold, hungry, falling asleep at the wheel, I almost didn't make it. But I did make it. Thank you, YCJY Games. Keep Driving doesn't have a release date yet, but I want to be the first to know. I actually had the demo downloaded for a couple of weeks before Nextfest, so I already knew I wanted to get to this one. It is bizarre, but in a way I like. VOIN flips between slick melee combat and slightly poorly explained but still fun exploration. I've been playing the Tide games for years, so the dance of dodging, light attacks and heavy attacks felt like second nature to me. It's not quite as silky as Dark Tide at its best feels, but it more than makes up for it with its itemization system. There's this almost Borderlands-y loot system where various items conferring different benefits can drop from defeated enemies. I ended up using a sword that gave me a rage mode that gave my attacks bonus fire damage, and when I landed a fully charged heavy attack I made chain lightning happen, and occasionally a meteor would fall from space and blast enemies, and upon death sometimes enemies would turn into a big flesh pinata, and if I hit it a bunch I would get some healing. It's just so fucking cool. For exploration, you move faster when your weapon is sheathed and you gain this super movement ability. It lets you do big leaps, although sometimes not big enough. Going up is kind of tricky, which is a shame because the levels have verticality in mind. Maybe I was just doing it wrong. The game is quite opaque on some of the finer details, and some of the systems aren't as self-explanatory. I completely forget what the 3 golden nuggets on the screen are. Also, your blue runes on the bottom is your stamina, which is confusing since combat also has 3 blue runes, but those are on the side of your weapon and are not related to your stamina at all. That's my biggest problem with VOIN right now. Combat is very readable, and I love that, but the world isn't. It's not clear where you're supposed to go or what you're even doing. The level design is kind of designed in such a way to lead you in a vague direction, but invisible walls are placed with no signposting, so I found exploration and even just regular traversal was impeded somewhat. And while I'm complaining, I spent ages running around the hub area, partly because it was very cool, but partly because it was also very form over function. It took way too long to figure out what any of the rooms were even for. But these are all ultimately small things. VOIN already has such a good gameplay loop and everything else has so much promise. I feel like all it needs is some tightening, and obviously more levels, but what I mean is the core is excellent. And for VOIN to have already nailed that makes me very confident in its future. I cannot wait to get my hands on the full game when it comes out and whenever to be announced is. Hey, thanks for watching. I didn't really expect to see another Nextfest this year, but I sure welcomed it. It wasn't a very big yield this demo harvest, but the crops we did get made for a sumptuous feast. And that's what really matters. So I am working on another video, one much larger in scope than the ones I've done before, but I just couldn't resist Nextfest's siren call. If you like the video, subscribe, hit the like button, and chuck a comment down below. I hear the algorithm loves that stuff. Until next time. I'm gonna have to clean that up later.